Today we're busy patting ourselves on the back for avoiding the fiscal cliff. I don't know how much congratulations we ought to have for that. Yesterday I was buying some groceries, and the guy at the checkout stand had no idea who I was and shouldn't have. And he said, "What's going on Capitol Hill?" He says, "What are those people doing? We ought to fire everybody in Congress. They can't get their work done. We have to get our work done. They don't have to get their work done." He made a good point, and I'm telling you, it got down to the level of grocery store checkout people. And I suspect different levels than that, different occupations than that. America, because they're kind of tuned into the news media, which is kind of an information media or an entertainment media, built this fiscal cliff so that it appeared to be Niagara Falls with money running over it. It's more of a gradual slope, but we have to stop the downward slope that we're on. It's important that we do that. And this is a body that can do that. Congress can do that. We do a war of words around here. This protecting the rich sticks. You know, I don't know of anybody that's trying to protect the rich. The problem comes into the definition of rich, and that's a hard one to explain. And any attempt that looks like that goes back to the sticky word rich, which nobody's trying to protect. I used to be in business. I was one of those small businessmen. And I know that at the end of the year, the business would show a profit. Now, unfortunately, we couldn't take the money out of the business if we were going to continue to grow the business, if we were going to put more people on. That meant that we needed to have more product. That meant that we had to have more investment in the business. So the money that we could have taken out that showed as profit actually went back into the business. And we kept saying, how come we have so little money when we make so much money? Well, that's the position that a lot of the small businessmen are in around this country. They're having to put all their money back into it. And I understand that when people say, you know, protect the rich, those making $250,000, $400,000, $450,000, whatever the amount comes out to be, that the person working in that business who's making $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 says, if all I'm making is that amount and they're making $250,000, we really ought to tax them. You know, it's a fairness issue. But when it gets down to the point of what they actually get to take out, what their take-home is, it's a lot different. They look really good on paper. They look rich on paper. But the money they get to take out is significantly less than that. And that's where the divide came up on trying to solve this problem. Now, could it have been solved? Yes, it could have been solved. What we need to do around this institution is start legislating and stop deal-making. We're a legislative body. We are not, you can't have 100 people involved in a deal. And consequently, we don't. We have a group of 2, as in the case of this one, or a group of 4 or 6 or 8, or maybe as many as 12, getting together, putting together some kind of a comprehensive package to put before this body. And those who aren't in the group are really kind of insulted by it. They don't make a big deal out of it because it's become the tradition. But it's not how it's supposed to work. I've been there. I've gotten to legislate. It's one of the privileges of this country. The main person that I legislated with was Senator Kennedy. Now, Senator Kennedy was considered one of the most liberal people in the Senate. I've always been considered one of the most conservative people in the Senate. But we were able to work together to get 38 bills out of committee and through this body. The worst vote we ever got was 15 votes against. How did we do that? Well, we didn't try to solve the world's problem all in one bill. We took an issue at a time, and we found the common ground. We found what we could agree on. And that was usually about 80% of the whole issue. 80%. That's pretty good. We worked on issues that had been around here 10 or 12 or 15 years without passing, coming to the floor numerous times. And what we mainly had to do was sit down with the stakeholders who were intensely interested in the bill, who had been lobbying on that bill for years and years and years. And we'd say to them, this is what we can get. This is what we have to leave out. It wasn't compromise. Compromise is when you give up half of what you believe in and I give up half of what I believe in, and we wind up with something that neither of us believe in. But common ground happens. There's common ground on every one of these issues, and that's what we've got to find, the common ground. So we would meet with these stakeholders and they'd say, no, you're leaving out the most important part of this whole bill. This is what we really want. And if it was Senator Kennedy's constituency, he'd have to make this comment. If it was mine, I'd have to make the comment. I'd say, how long have you been working on this? And they'd say, well, we've been working on this for 10 years. And I'd say, so how much of it have you gotten? And they'd say, well, nothing. And we'd say, well, here's what we can get for you, and outline it again. Isn't that better than nothing? And the light would come on. They'd say, oh, that would be good progress. And then they would quit pushing against us and they would get with us. It's amazing that sometimes the advocates for the bill are really the ones that stop the bill from happening. And it's over the issues, that 10% on each side, which amounts to 20%, that we're not going to get resolved. There's some basic values on both sides, and they're important to both sides, and they're both right. But they're not common ground. And that's where we've got to go. We've got to get to common ground again. And the way we do that is by legislating. You put out a bill that's 80% of the whole issue, not 100% of the whole issue, that's comprehensive. You put out the 80% that both sides agree on, and then you allow amendments on it. That's something we haven't been doing around here for a long time. And if you don't allow amendments, first of all, it has to go to committee. Committee is where the people intensely interested in that particular bill preside, work, exert their efforts. That's where they want to concentrate. That's where, when you have a bill that comes to committee, you can have maybe 200-300 amendments in committee. And the chairman and the ranking member, that's the name we give to the person with the most seniority in the minority, can sit down together and sort through these amendments. And out of the 200, there are probably 100 that nobody would really in their right mind offer. And out of the remaining ones, you'll find that there are people on both sides that have very similar ideas on how to solve that problem. And you get those people to sit down together, take a look at all the amendments that are similar to that, and see if they can't come up with a single amendment that will solve that part of the problem. And you know what? They do. Now, it might not be 100% of what they want. It's probably, again, only 80% of what they want. But it's something they can all agree on. And here's the really magnificent part that helps it get through committee. They can all say, it was my idea. They can all go to the media and put out the release that they solved this particular problem. And that helps a lot around here. So committee work, extremely important. When a bill comes out of committee, it's not perfect. Now, when Senator Kennedy and I were working the bills, we not only recognized they weren't perfect, but we were able to talk to some people that we weren't able to solve their problem by the time the amendment process came up in committee. But we promised to work with them till the bill got to the floor, and not to take the bill to the floor until we had a solution to that problem, or the right for them to offer an amendment. And that helped a lot to get the bill out of committee. Now, if you get the bill out of committee in a bipartisan way, meaning people from both sides of the aisle, both the Republicans and the Democrats and the independents, support the bill, then you've got a chance of bringing it to the floor and actually getting some time to do a debate. And the debate part's important. That's kind of where we bring America along on it. Now, there's coverage on the committee process, but that's a little harder to follow. But the debate here is where we bring America along on whatever ideas we have. And the debate here is very important. Now, over time, there's been this process. The leaders invent some things that actually concentrates the power in the hands of the leaders rather than the body as a whole. But it's the filibuster process. And that filibuster process can be manufactured. I got to tell you a couple of stories. One bill that I worked on around here had a solution for health care. I called it small business health plans. And the idea behind the bill was that small businesses could get together through their association or any way they wanted to, across state lines, even nationwide, to form a buying group big enough to take on the biggest of the insurance companies. Think about that. The power to take on the biggest of the insurance companies. And yes, there was some opposition to that. Called it insurance companies. Many of them worked with us and began to understand how they could participate in the process and went along with it. One of the biggest in the nation had some ads out of Massachusetts that opposed the bill and eventually helped to keep the bill from ever happening. On this small business health plan, when it came to the floor, I had the unfortunate happening of Senator Frist setting a filibuster and filling the tree. Filling the tree means that nobody can make another amendment to the bill. Now here's the catch. After this thing came out of committee, we got some of the people together that had a problem with the bill, and we had one amendment that would have solved those problems. With the tree filled, that one amendment can't come up. That one amendment can't happen. So what happens? We talked about the bill and how it lacked this particular part. I kept explaining how we had an amendment that would take care of that. Everybody in the chamber knew that that amendment was not going to happen, and consequently, on a process vote, it was killed with just over 40 votes. That's what happens with a filibuster. Now, had that amendment been possible, we would have had one of the things in place for health care, just one, but it would have solved a lot of things for a lot of businesses, and that's where a lot of people work in this country. It's where jobs are. So that's how you can do it. Now, my second story would be, and this one's much shorter. This year, Senator Harkin and I brought an FDA bill to the floor. Now, when it got to the floor, we explained to the leader that there were going to be 14 amendments. 8 of them would be brought up and fail. The other 6 would be withdrawn. A week later, we finally got to start on the amendments for that bill. There was worry that there would be some extraneous ones thrown in. Now, we already had agreement from, I guess you could say, the most conservative and most liberal from each of our sides, that they would not bring up the peripheral amendments, and they didn't. So a week later, when we finally got to start to vote, and we could have done that the same day, we finished up in a day and a half. What we had were 8 votes that got defeated and 6 amendments that were withdrawn. We wound up exactly where we knew we were going to be, and the bill passed here 96-1. That's how the committee process can work. That's how not having a filibuster can work, and that's what we need to get back to. I want to join the senator from California in the hope that the House will pass the bill that was sent over from the Senate last night. It was a tremendous amount of effort that was put into it by a whole number of people over a number of days and weeks, and I think is the best answer that we could come up with at this point in time. I particularly want to thank Leader McConnell and Vice President Biden for working numerous hours, starting again yesterday morning at 6:45 and winding up with something late last night, more than 12 hours later, over the last 2 issues, as I understand it. And yes, I'm glad that AMT was fixed. I would remind everybody that AMT is the last effort that we had to tax the rich. And it's backfired to where it now taxes everybody, or almost everybody. And so it desperately needed a fix. Now we're talking about taxing the rich again. I hope that we can come up with some collective ways that will be certain that the people are rich and that it will last over time instead of just for a few short years. In my area of the world, the biggest thing in that bill was the estate taxes. people that own land in Wyoming that they bought maybe at $40 an acre now have land that's worth $2,000 an acre or more. And they haven't figured out how to pay the taxes on these few acres that they were able to scrape together over a period of time if the amount of exemption went down to $1 million. And that's where we were headed. And at $1 million, they'd have to sell off part of their ranch, part of their farm, in order to be able to pay the taxes when somebody died. Now, all the time that that land's making a profit, people are paying the taxes on it. Then when they die, they have to pay taxes on something that they would like to keep and continue in operation. And so the estate tax piece of that was a very important part for a lot of America, and not just the ones where people are land rich and dollar poor. Of course, I keep wondering what would have happened if a month ago a basic bill would have been put on the floor, perhaps the president's proposal, and both sides been able to do amendments to it, and even multiple amendments on the same topic, like the Department of Defense bill. I think we did 119 amendments in a day and a half or 2 days. What if that would have happened on this bill? Would we have been able to come up with a package that would have, I suspect, be very similar to what we just passed last night, but done it with everybody participating, everybody understanding, the American public thinking that Congress is actually getting something done? That would be a huge relief. I think we could have done that with an open amendment process, limiting it probably to relevant amendments. There are a lot of different things that people would like to bring up because they don't know any other way they're going to get a vote, but I keep reminding my colleagues that when you bring up one of those irrelevant amendments, it might make it into a bill, but it'll be pulled out in conference committee, so you still didn't win anything. Well, I guess you can go make a big press release about how you got that into the bill to begin with. But I want to talk mostly today about the questions that I hear from Americans who say, why can't politicians in Washington get along? Why is there this gridlock? Those are questions the folks outside the Beltway have been asking, but like many questions, the answer is involved. For many, including President Obama and Senate Majority Leader Reid, it's easy and strategic to oversimplify the answer. They've identified GOP senators as the culprits and the filibuster as the instrument. But as one of those GOP senators, let me give you my side of the story. What I think people are missing, and what some in the majority want you to miss, is why a filibuster happens. You don't hear this from the majority leader, but for the last few years, many filibusters in the Senate have been designed and instigated by him. They haven't been through the committee process. Here's how it works. He has a bill that is popular with his party and whose title really sounds great. He knows many of those on our side, the minority, who would actually agree with many parts of the bill, but we would want votes on the items that could potentially be politically embarrassing. In order to avoid these votes, he skips the committee jurisdiction and brings the bill directly to the Senate floor. Then he uses an arcane parliamentary procedure. He files for cloture and fills the amendment tree. That means that he prevents amendments on the Senate floor, and often it's because he thinks they might be embarrassing for members on his side. And our majority leader is no slouch. He picks bills with great titles that on the surface anyone would support. Anyone. Remember, most of these have not been to committee. Now, who could possibly be against students or veterans or seniors or women? The problem for the minority is that within these great sounding bills, it's usually something that deep down, philosophically, in our bones, many just can't accept. An example would be tying a woman's health care to a mandatory public funding of abortions or adding gun control to otherwise acceptable crime bill. These are poison pills the majority knows the minority won't swallow. Best of all, politically for the majority, the minority gets blamed for filibustering, and the majority leadership looks like the hero fighting hard for the cause. A filibuster can be initiated by the majority leader to make the minority look like obstructionists. Now, if the majority party brings up a bill containing a poison pill, even though the bill has a great title, They shouldn't expect the other party to swallow the poison pill without using every delay tactic possible. In fact, they don't expect the minority to go along, and they use it to their full political advantage. Those of us on this side who are in the minority have been seeing bill after bill that didn't even go through committee with great titles containing poison pills come to the floor directly. We weren't assured even a vote to try to take the pill out, even though the majority had enough votes to assure the poison pill would stay in. That's the meaning of majority, enough votes to always win. If you can always win, why stop the vote? So stopping the right to vote should and has resulted in a filibuster. Now, the big, dirty, not-so-secret secret is that a filibuster can be controlled by the majority leader. If the leader agrees to allow an open amendment process, permission to proceed would be a formality and work could start immediately. That's what happened with the Department of Defense authorization that we just finished. It was a breeze through which the majority has turned from a stale Senate. We worked through more than 100 amendments in short order, but if no agreement to an open amendment process is agreed to before starting the bill, the minority still has to believe their amendments will be blocked. The majority can vote down any proposal it doesn't like, and with a motion to table can do it quickly. Let me say that again. With a motion to table, they can do it quickly. They can actually limit debate. That's why the minority has been filibustering on motions to proceed, and also why the majority leader wants to end that process. Delaying action on motions to proceed is our best chance to assure an open amendment process. We can slow the bill down to try to get that agreement. The majority still doesn't have to agree, and if they have 60 votes, they can move ahead. If they don't have 60 votes, it has to at least be a little bit bipartisan, just a little bit. The real point gets lost in all this. That is, to be effective, Congress has 535 people looking at every proposal. Lots of viewpoints, lots of experience. If all the decisions are going to be made by the majority leader, how does every American's elected leader get to represent his or her constituents? The people back home who put their faith in their senators expect to be represented by those senators, not a party or a majority leader who doesn't know them as their own senators do. The majority leader has used the filibuster count to effectively falsely claim obstruction by Republicans. Remember, you can manufacture a filibuster. Now he wants to weaken the filibuster further. That may happen day after tomorrow. That is damaging America's faith in Congress. That's damaging what the senator from California said was one of the basic principles of this body. There are already filibuster rules. If used, they would make those objecting spend time on the floor explaining themselves, actually talking. That already exists, and in a very limited way. Each senator has the right to 1 hour of debate during a filibuster follow. 1 hour. Now, they can have other people cede their hours to them, but it's still a very limited amount. And at any point there isn't somebody on the floor to take more of that hour, the presiding officer can end that part of the filibuster. So there are already ways to shorten the delay involved, but they aren't being used. Using current rules would be much better than breaking the rules for the first time in order to change the rules. We've never done that. It's been threatened once before. It didn't happen. I hope it doesn't happen during the time that I'm in the Senate. Breaking the rules to change the rules is not the way of the Senate for the history of the Senate. I know there are amendments on which the majority does not want to have a recorded vote that would put his members on record, but that's a price for being in the majority. I think our side would like to be in the majority and have to take those tough votes. They're putting us on record without the poison pill being obvious in the vote. All we're voting on is a bill title. And that's the way the people of America look at it. And it worked very well in the last election. Going all out to avoid votes is silencing the voices of millions of Americans and tearing down the institution of the Senate and eliminating transparency. The media usually demands transparency. This hides transparency. The proposal to weaken the filibuster would only hasten the Senate's decline. It's like adding lemon to a recipe that's already too sour. We don't need a new recipe. We don't need to change the rule as the majority is proposing. We need to use the great system that's been in place for hundreds of years. Even now, we get glimpses of it working. If the majority leader and those who advocate for the weakening of the filibuster were in the minority, they would speak out against it. In fact, they did. In 2005, when he was in the minority and the GOP started talking about challenging the filibuster, Senator Reid warned of grave consequences. I want to quote Senator Reid. "The time has come for those senators of the majority to decide where they stand, whether they will abide by the rules of the Senate or break the rules for the first time in 217 years. Will they support the checks and balances established by the Founding Fathers?" It's a quote from the majority leader. He asked if the majority would, quote, "silence the minority in the Senate and remove the last check we have in Washington against the abuse of power." Quote from Leader Harry Reid. I hope that he will follow his own advice and that will not be a part of the problem right after we swear in the new members this next week. So I hope the institution of the Senate will continue to be a Senate. I hope that we will have more of a committee process where people can work out the things that there are difficulties with and bring a more consolidated, more comprehensive, less compromising, that area between which neither of them believe, that will get to the floor and then have an open amendment process on the floor. And I guarantee that things will happen faster than they have been in the Senate. Holding up things a week or 2 weeks while we go through the whole filibuster process is a waste of our time. Amendments are not a waste of our time. I hope we can get back to that system. I yield the floor.